This is the normal distribution, and given its existence, you cannot claim that two-thirds of the population is extreme. There has been a claim thrown around of late claiming that such and such people and or beliefs are extreme. This claim has been used to provide casus belli, justification for illegal action. And if it's not illegal action, then it certainly has been used to justify provocative statements and actions which go beyond the pale. As a free market with reasonable regulation kind of capitalist, I have every incentive to stay completely out of this conversation. But things have gotten a little out of hand, and because I'm having trouble sleeping, I've decided to alleviate myself of my burden and explain something which goes against my self-interest. We have to share this country in spite of our differences. And given that we have to share this country, it would behoove us to have a semblance of a shared reference for what reality looks like. It doesn't matter if we can or can't know what it is definitively. We should at the very least be able to agree with some reasonable approximations. And so when people hurl around the term extreme, it's important to not use such words carelessly. In particular, the word extreme comes with numerous existential threats associated with it when used to describe people and institutions. For it to be appropriately used, it needs to account for something actually extreme. It cannot simply be hurled at those who disagree with one, along with other names that might be, similar. So let's look at the normal distribution to make sense of this. Namely, the normal distribution represents how things tend to aggregate around a median value, aka the middle number in an ordered series. So if you took all the varsity athletes and lined them up in order of height, the player in the middle of the line would be the median. Although there might be some exceptionally tall basketball players at one end of the spectrum, the math would show that 68.3% of the players are roughly the same height. This distribution, by the way, works for many things in life. The reason we know it works is because when people have historically looked around, they observed that many things in the world follow this distribution. And for an even more common English explanation, the reason the normal distribution appears time and again is because the world we live in, reality, appears to have rules governing it. And since it appears to have rules, those rules tend to work themselves out to produce a similar result two-thirds of the time, with a more noticeable difference occurring only one-third of the time. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can go back to the normal distribution and explain why it's inappropriate to consider two-thirds of the population extreme. But first, let me change the distribution a little. Since, we're living in a strange time, I can't discuss the following using left and right of the distribution. So instead, I'll fold the distribution together in half along the mirroring bisect, and then simply reduce this further into 3 bar graphs. So on the bottom, we have the first deviation, known as the center. The two-thirds of the population who are different but similar enough to have overlapping beliefs. These people are the backbone of civilization. They make the world go round, and for the most part, they're too busy making the world work to pay attention to the bickering going on outside the center of the distribution. In a country of 260 million voting-age people, that means they represent roughly 175 million. Then, above this group, we have the second deviation, known as the base. They represent over a quarter of the population, and let's say that these people are different enough from their mirror image that they essentially do not have any overlapping beliefs. And for safety reasons, I will not describe these people other than to say they represent the bulk of the people who have a strong interest in politics. Please note that since the base is made of two separate ideologies whose mirror images have been combined into a single block, each ideology is only represented by half the amount here. Therefore, in the same country of 260 million voting age people, only about 35 million people fall into this category on each side. Finally, we have the third deviation, known as the fringe. They represent a mere 4% of the population. And let's say that, in theory, these people are so different from both of the other two groups that it should be obvious. Put another way, even if people in this group might vote alongside with their counterparts in the second deviation, the base, the people of the second deviation don't want to associate themselves with these individuals wholeheartedly. Without naming any specifics, there's usually something about this group, the fringe, that differs so much from the center that it's at least politically unwise to agree with them, since agreeing with the third deviation means agreeing with the fringe of the party. And if the first deviation finds out, the center, then they may vote against them. At any rate, that means in a country of 260 million voting age people, only about 5 million people fall into this category on each side. So then, we have three groups of people, all sharing the same country, but divided along the middle, sort of. Remember, the people in the middle are so similar that in any given election, they may or may not vote along party lines, if at all. Given all of the above, allow me to explain. First, for any party to have a reasonable chance of re-election or re-election, and in my opinion, a reasonable chance of good governance, they have to operate somewhere near the center. Otherwise, the voters will rebel against them, and the gains they get from the fringe won't make up the losses. That's the pragmatic side of all this. 175 million potential voters are more important than 5 million. Second, for any party to appear to not align with the fringe members of their own party, they have to, in aggregate, not conduct themselves as if they're aligned with the fringe of their party. Outside those who represent regions overrepresented of the third deviation views, it's simply not viable to speak like the fringe. Third, everyone opposed to your political beliefs can't be extreme. That means for any political party to have a chance of success, it cannot simply claim that everyone who disagrees with them is extreme. There are stories online of people who obviously have participated in a party their entire lives, and yet who are publicly being denied their party identity just because they disagree with one thing. Just one thing. That's all it takes to be barred from the identity group. Now, of the three deviations, only one of the groups would do this regularly, the fringe. But we're dealing with the qualitative, which means it's only a loosely known thing defined by its quality. So I'm willing to concede that there might be some room for flexibility here. After all, what if the other party actually has been captured by something? What if it effectively does act like the fringe using some version of the equation? Effect times quantity equals total effect, where even if only a small percentage of people are acting badly, as long as the effect they have is outsized, then the damage they do is effectively the same as if everyone had been complicit. Well then, in that case, you could include not only the fringe of the opposition, but also the base and some approximation of the problem. As such, you could, in theory, ascribe extreme behavior to both the second and third deviation on the other side of the line. So, on a voting age population of 260 million, that's 40 million people. It's a bit of an over exaggeration, but I'm being flexible here, and I'm being flexible to make a rather glaring point. Because despite me providing significant leeway here, you cannot then go on from this to assert that the center is also complicit. Because if you do, then you're basically saying only your side knows what reality is. On balance, not only is it highly unlikely that your 40 million people are more correct than the other 220 million voting age people, but without grounding your ideas somewhere nearer to the center than the fringe, I can't imagine how such a party believes it will govern against the will of 84% of the population. In conclusion, disagreement is not extremism. Provocative beliefs may anger us, but true extremists are only a sliver of the population. When norms break down, fringe actors seize the moment. Recent incitement and acts of property destruction prove the danger. Yet the vast majority of Americans remain in the center. We're all going to have to share this country. I said that in the beginning. That means grounding every accusation in verifiable data, not demonizing 175 million people. If one side commits to sober, evidence-based rhetoric, it offers a genuine beacon of hope and pressures the other side to rethink its strategy. Note, less than half of voting age Americans cast a ballot, so any survey that vanishes non-voters paints a bimodal picture, but it erases a large, moderate center. Include that missing middle, and you restore the bell curve. Anyhow, that's all I have to say about this.